everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always is a fabulous co-host.
Hey, Rob, it's me, Diana.
Diana, where are you right now? You're not here. You're usually here with me because we live in the same house. I'm here with you in the
virtual space, which is really all that matters. But physically, I am in a ball field, which is kind of how it goes for summertime.
And our other fabulous co-host, Jaggy McDonald, was here a second ago, but is actually coming to the studio because her internet crapped out. So she'll be here shortly, but we didn't want to waste any of our special guests' time. Special guest, you say? What kind of podcast is this? Some sort of Where's Waldo of host podcast? No, it's a behavior analysis podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research. And every week we pick a topic. And sometimes, especially in months like July, which is our special guest month, we have special guests come on. And since we're just talking about stuff, we figured let's do a topic about public speaking and effective dissemination, aka talking about stuff meaningfully. And to do that, we're very, very fortunate to have our special guest joining us and getting to watch all of our fun recording antics. It's Mandy Ralston. Mandy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Is it so much, really? After the 10 minutes of preamble we put you through on?
Well, I mean, that's the appropriate introverbal, right? Like, I'm not going to have an honest tact about the whole situation.
Have you ever brought that speaking of dissemination, have you ever brought that up to somebody when we're talking about, the different operants, or like maybe it's an intro course and you bring up the idea of, manned versus introverbal, and you use that example of the sort of pleasantry phrase and like watch people's minds be like, oh my God, you're right. Nobody does care how my day is going.
No, I've talked about this for years, right? So one of my slides in my frequent presentation that I do is just me, my picture, and then good enough. Because when people ask me, how are you? I've been saying good enough for years. Because again, it's a really useful, quick tact, and it doesn't require a motivating operation for an additional man for information, right? Nobody likes it when you answer honestly and say, well, I'm not so great, right? Because then they have to ask follow-up questions, and nobody wants that. So,
so interesting. Verbal behavior, so interesting.
Yeah.
But Mandy, so we're going to be talking about not the best policy.
Only sometimes.
It's true.
So it's the ethical best policy, and it's not the socially comfortable best policy most of the time.
Absolutely.
So we did a topic a long time ago where we sort of talked about public speaking, and one of the articles we'll be sort of, referring to, we did discuss a long time back, but we have some updated ones. And Mandy, you're someone who does a lot of public speaking and dissemination. So we're really excited to sort of hear both, from the experts in the papers and then also your expert opinion. And I'll be honest, after 8 years of doing this podcast, there are, I would say, probably recorded more content from me, Diana, and Jackie than a lot of folks out there who do conference talks and stuff, just because we keep talking and recording it.
We just won't
out
stop
in space
talking
forever and ever. So we can't stop. Won't stop, can't stop.
Yeah. That's fantastic. 8 years. It's amazing.
It's a long time. But enough about us. Mandy, tell us about you and how you became such a public speaker of note and an expert in this area.
I have no idea, but I'd like to send a little shout out to all my elementary school teachers that said that I talk too much in class. So it's like, look at me now. How you like me now, folks? No, I've been a behavior analyst. I've been in the field since 1999. So I got started working with 7 children here in Lexington, Kentucky, that were flying a consultant out from California once a quarter to cobble together an ABA program, way before there were any kind of payment for such programs, certification had just started in 1998. Yeah. So I sort of got in super early. And my mentor was Dr. Vincent Carbone. I was super lucky to badger him lightly enough that he agreed to mentor me. And so, my mentorship with him included using VHS tapes recorded of me, doing various procedures and sending it to him in the mail so that he could review them. That's how old I am, right? So
we're right there with you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. I hate talking to people who make me feel old. So I think I modeled a lot of my initial style and work off of Carbone, right? Like he was out there doing 3-day workshops to teach people about verbal behavior and new ways of getting learners to come to the table, way before people were talking about assent. It's like actually motivating somebody to want to work with you to get something good rather than motivating a learner to do something for you because they want to avoid something bad, which was where a lot of early ABA came from. And so since he was out there, talking a lot, I started doing the same thing here in Kentucky. I was doing 2 and 3 day workshops to help families, again, cobble together these programs early on because there weren't technicians. There were only 2,000 behavior analysts worldwide. I mean, it was very, very, very nascent at that point. So that's how I got started.
It's always good to feel the need, and especially if you were working with Dr. Carbone and you were talking about any verbal behavior. I feel like late 90s, early 2000s, verbal behavior sort of hadn't had the big resurgence in popularity, and that I think a lot of folks starting in the mid like 2010s. Oh, verbal behavior. I'll talk about verbal behavior. I'll talk about verbal operants, because I feel like it was sort of one of those like, let's not bring it up as much in that kind of 90s, early 2000s period. Yeah. So you must have been, having to really disseminate something that not everyone was interested in hearing about.
It's true. It's a part of my bio says that I am happy to engage in copious amounts of verbal behavior about verbal behavior. Yeah. I mean, it was a whole new way of thinking about language, and it really didn't catch on for probably 4 to 5 more years, I'd say around 2007. And so I ended up naming my second company that I founded Verbal Behavior Consulting, because it really was sort of the linchpin of the foundation of the philosophy of the teaching style that we engaged in the clinic. So yeah.
So when you started out, you were doing multiple public speaking type activities a day. And I know one of the things that comes up in the articles that we'll be discussing is the idea that there's, public speaking. We usually think of like, I go to a conference. I'm the keynote speaker at a conference. That's when I do public speaking, and everything else is lesser or doesn't count. But I think the authors of the articles, and I certainly think I would also agree with the statement that when you're public speaking, it's anytime you are standing in a group of more than you. So unless you're talking in a mirror, you're public speaking. So if it's one person, 1,000 people, something streaming on the internet, right? You're doing public speaking. What do you? I mean, do you think about public speaking that way, or do you kind of usually think about it as like the big public versus the small public speaking?
No, I mean, I think there's the sort of the classical viewpoint of public speaking, as you said, sort of having to be on stage, have to have an audience that is sitting that obviously signed up to come listen to you. But no, it's correct that public speaking is generally when you are in public and speaking to other people. And I have come to understand that people like to hear me talk. It's been probably in the last 5 to 6 years that I've been like really aware of the fact that I'll start talking and people just sit and go, oh, what is she going to say next? Which is a fascinating skill to have, because public speaking is actually like the number one fear or phobia for most people.
Yeah.
And I just don't have it. Like if you put me in a room with 2 strangers and tell me I have to bake a pizza with them, like I'll get sweaty thinking about that. But if you put me in a group of people and say, can you talk about whatever? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. It's great. So.
Oh, good. So, I mean, how much like public speaking, when you think of sort of like the capital P, capital S public speaking, how much do you feel you have to do sort of in your typical day these days?
I mean, at least 2 hours a day, I would say. I am sort of a red hot introvert. Like I do require some alone time to sit and marinate with my own thoughts in order to have the fuel to run my mouth otherwise. But yeah, I'd say at least 2 hours a day that somebody asks me a question, and then off to the races I go with whatever I have to say about it. So
I hope it's consecutively. Like someone's like, how is everything going? And you're like, timer on.
Right. Yeah.
No, we know the answer to that question is good enough.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, well, now that Jackie has arrived in the studio, now you're live in the studio.
Here now, live in the studio.
Speaking of those articles, let's really quickly go over what we will sort of be referring to in our episode today.
So today we'll be reading a few articles. Well, we've read them actually, but we're going to.
You know what? That's how we're doing public speaking. We're just reading the articles. We brought Mandy on just to listen to us read to her.
Okay, so the first article we will be incorporating is Ask the Experts. How can new students defend behavior analysis from misunderstanding? And that is by, I'm going to kill it. This is why Diana does this. Becirevic-ish. Please write me back.
Becirevic?
Becirevic, maybe. But this is in Behavior Analysis and Practice, 2014. I really like that article. It's one of my faves. And then the next article is also on public speaking. Surprise! And it is by Patrick Friman, and it is entitled Behavior Analysis to the Front, or Behavior Analyst to the Front, a 15-step tutorial on public speaking. That was published in 2014 as well in the now defunct Behavior Analyst.
Or transition over to something else.
Yeah, now it's Perspectives. But I liked
the Behavior Analyst better.
I liked that. Anyway, and the last article is Heineke, Juanico, Valentino, and Sellers. And the article is entitled Improving Behavior Analyst Public Speaking Recommendations from Expert Interviews. And that was published in Behavior Analysis and Practice in 2000 and my eyes.
22.
22. I'm an old person.
You are the only person I know, Jackie, who has worse eyesight than me.
Everything's got to be like 100 font.
Okay. I'm just going to all right. So, Mandy, you mentioned sort of, one of the things that was kind of cool about the Heineke article was just the idea of what if we asked a bunch of people who get asked to be at a lot of talks about behavior analysis, what do they do? And you can sort of tell if you've read Pat Fryman's article where he answers the question, because he's very consistent with his style because he brings back a lot of the same statements. But I think everyone kind of had there were some similarities, but a lot of differences as to how do people become public speakers, feel they became better public speakers. I know you mentioned that you sort of just, based on the need, were public speaking from minute one of doing the job in Kentucky. But there's more to public speaking than just talking at people because they need you to talk to them. How would you say your journey as a public speaker or an effective public speaker developed? And sort of like, where are you now as a public speaker in terms of like your style and your way of speaking?
Yeah, first of all, Pat Friman is a hero of mine. Like his speaking style, the way that he thinks about the world, how he moves through the world, fascinating, wonderful. I adore him. And yeah, I loved his article. I tend to like speed read through most of the articles, but I went through and like copy and pasted all of his 15 points. Spoiler alert, did anybody catch the fact in the article that it's actually 16 points?
Yeah, there were 2 4s. And I'm not sure if it wasn't supposed to be 2 4s or like it was a page break and it sort of got mixed up. Because 15 does sound better. 16 points I don't want to read 16 points. Get out of here with that, Pat. Right. 15 though. That's the sweet spot. So
yeah. No, amazing. I was like, wait a minute. You snuck an extra point in here, Pat. So yeah, look for that. I'm gonna text him later and sort of be like, what's up with that? Totally curious if that was like an Easter egg or if that was an accident. But anyway.
Yeah, it could be either. I could see it being something he thought was funny and like, I wonder who'll catch this.
Right? I think his second point is study. Right? His second point is study people who are good in the front of the room. And I think that's where my public speaking journey probably started for ABA. Because again, I studied Carbone, right? And I think in most cases and things where I don't know what to do or I'm nervous or scared about doing it, I tend to find somebody that I think has done it well and try to copy or mimic their behavior as much as possible. I have a pretty strong echoic background. So yeah, following Carbone's footsteps as much as possible was a way for me to get into a neural pathway of what it feels like to speak effectively by sort of adopting a persona that wasn't my own. And then as you do it with time, it becomes more of you, right? So I think that's a really good hack, is just to pretend that you are somebody that's already doing it well. There's a quote about something about, what's the difference, or even if you're not brave, pretend to be. Nobody can tell the difference, right? And that's sort of it. So.
Do you say you have a style of public speaking? Like I know, like Pat Friman is like the consummate public speaker storyteller. Like there's always a story. Sometimes literally anecdotes that are kind of getting to the central point. Sometimes it's just more like this is a theatrical performance in a way, not to diminish the message or diminish how he speaks, but there's a sense that like it's a one-man show that you're watching, which is so different than anybody else who I've seen at conferences.
And like the pace, like he does that like 3 steps. So I am similar to you, and I am like, okay, I'm going to write down all the weird things that he does that make him a great public speaker. And it's like the movement around the room and like his hand placement. I actually heard that his hand placement he timed like hand movements to where he was in his speech because he memorizes it so that then he can do the hand movements and then memorize if he like forgets where he was, which is super clever. Yeah. I don't know if it's true or not because I didn't hear it from him, but someone told me that.
That's interesting, right? Because like, again, part of verbal behavior, when you cannot come up with the tact of the thing, right? Sometimes you engage in a mimetic response in order to bring the tact, right? So if somebody says, what's your phone number from childhood? And you go 304, right? As you're actually punching the numbers on an old phone. I know.
Or you go like this.
Yeah, I know you young people won't understand this at all, but there used to be buttons on a phone. And you could engage in a specific physical topography that would evoke the tact of your phone number. And so that makes sense that, if you're going to memorize your speech, that you would have particular hand placements. That totally makes sense.
He writes us in and tells us if it's true or not.
Yeah, me too, right? I am not a storyteller. Obviously, I'm pretty kinetic as far as like my speaking style. And I think it goes with how my brain works. I'm neurodivergent, ADHD, noise. And I always sort of joke that like my brain is sort of like a human octopus, or I say that I have an intellectual decorator crab that collects information. It's like constantly surfing through all the clutter and like, hey, maybe that'll be useful sometime later. So you put that on your shoulder and hey, maybe that was attached to this other thing sometime. And so, yeah, I use my PowerPoint slides as a guide about where I'm starting and where I'm going, but I'm very easily able to talk off of, whatever riff that comes up. And I like when people ask me questions in the middle of my presentations because I can connect things to what they're saying, even if it seems disparate at the time. So that's me.
Jackie, Diana, how about what do you think your speaking style is at this point in your lives?
So I'm going to go first to give Diana time to think about it. But full disclosure, I was a horrendous public speaker going into this field. So on one of my recommendations for the doctoral program that I went into, my advisor wrote that I was in the bottom 1% of public speaking, and that if I tried hard, maybe I would be able to do it. So I just want everyone to know that was me, like 20 years ago. I would have to write everything out on the bottom of my slide. I would like sweat profusely. I would get sick. One time I even think I got sick, but I think I was sick because I was presenting that Diana had to present my topic for me at a conference because I just couldn't do it. So maybe I was actually sick, or maybe I was like stage fright sick, but I used to be really, really bad at it. And through an immense amount of practice right now, that's my job is as a professor, right, to be a public speaker. Now I'm less scared, but there are some moments like first day of class. I always get the little bit of a jitters, but I'm also more of a rambler. And sometimes I don't even follow the PowerPoint. And I'm like, oh no.
I'll take that over the read the PowerPoint.
Yeah, but it was bad. It was really, really bad. And so if anyone's like, I'll never be a public speaker, you actually can. It is a skill that you can acquire and overcome, because I mean, how sad it was when I read that in my recommendation. I was like, ouch.
That's some pretty brutal feedback.
Right? Bottom 1%. And it didn't even tell me to my face. It was just in the recommendation.
You don't want to say, how did you quantify that? Like, did you have a rubric you were using?
I mean, it was true, though.
Yeah.
So, Diana, how about you?
Well, I will say, Jackie, I think that you lost your voice that time that I had to present for you. I think it was legit.
Okay. It felt not legit to me, but...
Maybe it was one of those, like, the response effort to get over the inconvenience, plus the stressor of it.
You're right. I did lose my voice.
Unless it was psychosomatic laryngitis.
Jinx. Yep.
I would say that I am a good bit like you, Mandy, in that I'm truly an introvert. And if you were to say, hey, why don't you go to this party and make small talk with people you don't know? Like that makes my insides like try to crawl out of my mouth. Like I hate that idea more than almost anything. I used to have an event at work where that was like the sole purpose of the event. And one of my friends, she would take data for me of how many times I left to go to the bathroom during this event. And she'd be like, wow, only 3 times this time did you leave. But if you put me up in front of a room, it's a really different energy for me. And I really enjoy being up there and public speaking in that way. I certainly have, gotten better at it over time. For me, I think one of the challenges is trying to sort out exactly where your audience is at in terms of what they're ready to listen to, what they're receptive of, and what's going to be interesting for them, and then trying to, modulate the focus of your talk based on what your audience is really interested in hearing about. So that to me is a skill that I hope to think I've continued to develop over time. One of my favorite not good things to do is to get off track on my slides, remember something that I think is like super duper clever and important to talk about it, and then flip to the next slide and realize I'd made a whole slide for that. And here was the slide to go with the talk I just gave. And then I say, oops, sorry, everyone. I just talked about that already. So, I still have work to do in terms of my discipline and trying to keep myself giving the best performance that I can. But I really do enjoy it being up there.
I love that. Yeah.
So we're going to go through a couple of the recommendations and sort of how relevant we've found they are for each of us and which ones we sort of live by. But just because we keep talking about the expert panel from the Heineke article, we should probably say the speakers, the identified expert speakers, which again, I love how they sort of chose the speakers based on like how much they were asked to present. And then they had to go by who got back to them too. So the top 10 that they used here, spoilers, was not actually their original top 10. I think it was like their top 8 or top 7, I believe. And then they had to go to the next 5. They do not write in here like, and then we brought these 3 on because we had to. Bluck. They're not as good. So we don't know which ones were sort of the backup. We're like the plan B speakers.
Let's not guess either.
I know, no, we're not going to guess. I just think it's funny that they had to put that in the article to be technologically sound in their procedures. But they spoke with Jim Carr, Willie DeLeon, Pat Friman, Tim Hackenberg, Greg Hanley, Linda LeBlanc, Greg Madden, Matthew Norman, Dave Palmer, and Tristram Smith, many of whom I don't think I've seen. I might have seen everybody. There are a few I don't think, 1 or 2 I don't think I've seen.
Did you just name 9 men and 1 woman?
Yep.
Hey, it's not my list, Mandy. That's what they got here. I think they do bring up. They did bring up that this was based just on who had the most within a period of time, like who was invited the most, which does come up, I think, when we talk about speakers, the appropriateness of, hey, there are other people who need to speak. But anyway, I mean, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm just really attuned to this kind of demographic data at this point. Like who gets the stage, who's being invited, who's doing the talking, and so definitely just heard 9 men's name and 1 woman. I wonder what ethnicity all those folks are as well.
Pretty much white.
It's pretty white.
Yeah. So let's just put a pin in that as a point of data.
So what you're saying is this is going to be a great follow-up maybe in a couple years as we see more invited BIPOC speakers, female speakers. It's going to be a good follow-up of like new recommendations, possibly not for white men.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
What year was this article from?
This is 2022.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think even in the last 2 years, we've seen a very big shift in our field about who gets invited to speak, right? And who's listening. And I think that's a great thing. So yeah, completely here for it to see the follow-up article for this one.
All right. Well,
I did want to make a caveat. So when I was not a behavior analyst, when I was actually a play therapist, gasp.
This is a long time ago. You were young.
I was young. I went to a play therapy conference and they invited Tristan Smith to talk.
Was that the one where he got yelled at or something?
Yeah. So that is where I first was introduced to ABA, where Tristan Smith was invited to this play therapy conference, and they booed him off the stage and threw their binders at him. What? And I went up to him and I apologized. And I said, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. And he's like, you should really look into ABA. And then I did.
So is Tristan Smith like the velvet underground of speakers, and that like not everyone has seen him speak, but the behavior analysts who have seen him speak went on to do, tons of dissemination about behavior analysis?
Maybe, but amazing. I think that's a fun little Tristan Smith story.
I love that.
He passed away.
So each of them.
Yes, he's dead.
So Heineke and colleagues asked a number of questions, sort of survey questions to each of these authors. And so these are their thoughts in this article. We'll go over a couple of them, but mostly focus on the ones that either we found the most relevant for us or ones that we would like to add to the list. But so let's just start off. So we've got Friman 2014, which I guess at this point you could just read Heineke 2022, because having read both of them very recently, Pat Friman's pretty consistent with his steps as he is in responding to these survey questions, to the point that some of the quotes, I think, are directly from the 2014 article. So he's got his system locked down, and I don't think any of us want him to change it at this point. We like it.
Yeah.
Were there any tips that as you were going through kind of the different topics, sort of preparation, tone of voice, how do you enter? How do you talk to different audience types? We'll go over some of these in more detail. But did any jump out at you as, yes, this is something that I have seen them do and now I do it? Or something that I do as well and I love it and I would also recommend this to aspiring public speakers, which really should be everybody in this field?
Well, one of Pat's recommendation is to take control of the introduction, and I appreciate that so much because honestly, if anything makes me nervous about public speaking, it is the 5 minutes off stage before somebody hands me the mic when they're doing the introduction. I'm always like, please, for the love of God, stop talking about me. Just let me get started. That's the worst part of the whole presentation for me, so I appreciated that. But the other one that really caught my attention is number 4, which is capture their attention. And I love this, and I wrote this down. He says that audiences are fickle. Their attention cannot be taken for granted. To be effective, a speaker has to capture it early or risk not obtaining it at all. In many chains of events, what happens early determines the outcome. For example, sensitive dependence on initial conditions, the foundational assumption, and chaos theory. I mean, who brings chaos theory into public speaking other than Pat Friman, right? Like the fact that he touches on that, and then he goes on to say that the metaphorical statement, the flapping of a butterfly's wings in the Western Hemisphere can cause a typhoon in the Eastern Hemisphere, is in wide circulation. And so, again, the fact that he's bringing sort of the butterfly effect into how this pertains to capturing your audience in a public speaking event, I love that. Again, that's just right up the alley of my intellectual decorator crab of how, wide-ranging ideas can touch together somehow. So, love that.
Yeah. Jackie Dana, how about you? What were some of the kind of expert recommendations that you're like, yep, that's how to speak, that's how to do it?
Mine was also capture their attention only because I have been to conferences where someone starts talking and the intro is so long and boring that I just... Right? Then they're just like, here's the reason why I'm up here, but it's not at all engaging. And then even though the procedures and results are amazing, I've already left. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I think that one is huge for me. And when they were like, yeah, right in the beginning, capture them right early, because I've personally have like checked out, like played a game, right? When I'm like, oh my God, how many intro slides can you possibly have? Like we all know this information over and over again, but that one for me was my key.
Mm-hmm.
Diana?
Starting strong is definitely important. And I think in our field in particular, we are very detail-oriented people. And so we love data and we love to talk about data and we love to show our data. And we're like, we're also like so proud of our graphs and everything, but that level of detail does not always translate great to a larger audience, particularly if we're looking to reach out to folks who maybe outside of our field and don't have the same love for data that perhaps we do. So I think we can become quite easily bogged down in the details, and we're wading around in the details and having a great time and pulling up details and little facts that we want to show one another, but that doesn't always translate well bigger picture. So stepping back away from the details sometimes tends to make for the better talks. If you can pause and pull out and provide your audience with some, macro level observations about what they should be taking away from the talk, that will assist them greatly, I think, in finding meaning in what you're saying versus staying in so close with the details, even though I know that, we do love that. So that was one of my takeaways.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD-level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there!
Hey, everybody. Just wanted to pause our conversation with Mandy Ralston to remind our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. By listening to the show, you're able to earn 1 learning credit. All you need to do is finish listening and then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, or click the link in your show notes to go directly there and enter in some key information, including 2 secret code words. And these are special secret guest code words from Mandy. The first word, this is going to be a tricky one, perspicacious.
What does that even mean?
I will tell you, but first let me spell it for you. Perspicacious. Perspicacious. It is a way that Mandy says people have described her, and she found it to be a useful vocab word. It means having a ready insight into an understanding of things, according to Oxford Languages. So perspicacious, a fun code word and a new vocab word for all y'all.
I was hoping that I had to do something with perspiring.
Oh.
Like, because you get sweaty when you public speak.
Oh, that would be good too. I think that would be perspirationious or something else.
Yeah,
but anyway, you don't need to know that fake word you just made up. Perspicacious, the real word, you should know. All right, let's go back to the episode. I think that brings up the point of sort of public speaking per audience, and part of our topic today is effective dissemination. And, the question of, I know we want to think about our audience because different audiences are going to kind of evoke different behavior in us as speakers, as well as we need to be, responsive to different listener behaviors and histories of learning behavior based on our audience. But Diana, you bring up a point, and it's sort of in these articles. I don't think it's quite as explicitly put out of. If you take some of those tips as to good preparation, telling stories, as to being captivating, capturing your audience, as to sometimes thinking about the macro level, they have some great recommendations as to how should you show a graph in here. And in terms of, it's like, just show the key part of the graph. Do not go into super detail on the graph. Should we really be thinking about effective dissemination as this talk is great for every audience, and I start from a place of anyone should be able to understand this, and then I add in more detail if my audience is behavior analysts versus sort of someone who's not directly in the field? Or do you find it better practice to fine tune your talk for each audience very different? Like, I know what I want to talk about, but I'm going to make a different speech for this group versus that group. Like, how do you approach that? For me, I want to do it once and then just, it's so great, everyone loves it forever. But I know that's not always going to be true, depending on the topic.
Was that directed towards Diana?
No, that's
think it's
to
you.
everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can always go first, Mandy, because you're the special guest. I can always just ask Diana this like later today if.
Well, I mean, that's a very technological approach. This is very ABA of you, Robert, to do that. It's certainly not how I generally approach these things. Again, I sort of have like a jazz-like improvisational style. So I'm usually reading the room, and if people have like a blank look on their face, then I'm like, okay, maybe I should be a little less heady about this. Or if they're nodding and they're smiling and they look engaged, and it's like, okay, I know that they're tracking what I'm talking about. But I do think for people that are less comfortable, that's a wonderful approach, is to start with sort of a wireframe of what your talk's going to be like. And then as you understand the degree of technical difficulty that they're ready for, you can add to. Because it's difficult to take away from your slides and from your presentation in the moment. It's probably easier to add. So I think that's a great approach.
I have been in a talk before where the slides were so technical I didn't understand what they meant. But the author, like the speaker was like, oh, I over-prepared here, and so no one knows what I'm saying. But then the talk, I understood. But when I looked at the slide, I'm like, I have no idea what's happening there. So that was a disconnect, though, right? I had a trouble like, okay, now I'm just going to completely ignore the slides. So why were they even there?
Yeah, I mean, I have to do a lot of pitches with my business now. So rather than running a clinic, I have a tech startup where I'm making clinical decision support software for other providers. And part of the process of raising funds is pitching to potential investors, right? And one of the things that I learned in this process of having a tech startup with the pitch decks and the visuals that you use is really having simple slides that really capture the one or two, maybe three main points of whatever it is that you're trying to convey to your audience. Because if they're having to read and listen to you at the same time, they're not going to listen to you, right? Or if they're lost in the text, if the text is too small, if you've got a bunch of different graphics going at the same time, like your audience is going to be completely lost. So I've really learned to use my slides in a way that supports what I'm saying. Also, sidebar, we get a lot of people in our field that are neurodivergent themselves, right? And so if you are overstimulating in one way or the other, then you're probably losing a good bit of your audience. So
Mandy, I have such a hard time with that sweet balance of what's going to be in my slide deck, because sometimes I feel like I'm preparing as a speaker is not how I would want to hear my talk as a listener. Because a lot of times as a listener, what I want almost, and maybe that's because I've just been going to webinars that I haven't liked as much recently, I kind of just want to be like, listen, could you just send me the slides? I'll read them. I'm a smart person. I'll just read them. I'll get what I need out of it. And then I don't need you. But then to some extent, while there's a benefit to that, in some ways, I guess that would mean that the talk itself wasn't very good. Because if I could just say, listen, I just need you to add like a sentence or two to each of these slides, and you could have sent it to me and I'm good. I got the content, or I could have read the article. Why do I need to see you as a public speaker? Because I agree, when you have to do the speaking, you do sort of have to have that bravery of, I understand people want to learn something new, but at the same time, the second my slides are bullet, bunch of facts, and I'm very guilty of doing that a lot. It's almost like, well, why would I hear you talk about it? I can just get your slides later and I'll get everything I need. Do you ever feel that? Do you ever get that sense of like, I want to share all the information, but I also don't want it to all be on the slides, because then why listen to me?
Absolutely. And I think you have to consider learning styles as well, right? Like maybe you want the slides and you'd rather just read it because you can gain the information faster that way, right? Like, it's difficult for me to sit still. So I like to be in motion. I don't like to sit still and read things very much. And so audiobooks are better for me. So yeah, if your slides have a bunch of text on it, then I'm probably not going to sit still to pay attention. I'm going to be antsy to go do something else. And yes, give me your slides and I'll read it myself later. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough balance strike.
Do you find it's different? So like, you were talking about sort of in the early days, you're doing a lot of kind of workshop type talks. Are those settings where you might say, I do actually put a little more text in there because I know the purpose of this is like, you need to listen to me and then read this and then do something with this information, versus say, I'm the keynote speaker, in which case I just need to get everyone jazzed about the line of research I'm talking about. Like, I don't care if you then go replicate it tomorrow. I just need you to want to learn more.
That's right. With the workshops, the slides were much more dense. And again, I was trying to copy as much as I could from watching Carbone and what he did. Like if you would go to Carbone's workshop number 1, which was an introduction to verbal behavior back in the day, you would have a 3-inch ring binder of PowerPoint slides. And so, I mean, hundreds of PowerPoint slides, printed out for you to take home with you. And so during his presentations, he would sort of touch on some of the highlights of those different slides, but then you had the whole workbook to take home with you. And so when I was doing the same thing to try to help people build these programs on their own, they would go home with a 100-page document of here's all the different data sheets. Here's the procedures. Here's how to do a RFC to interverbal transfer procedure. All of it. It was all very detailed. So that's a different mechanism altogether.
So, and I guess some of that has to do with your audience. Oh, sorry, Diana, you were.
I was just gonna say, like, I think that we're all such nerds because I'm like, ooh, a 100-page binder, yes, please. But like you're saying, like there are different types of talks. So there are talks where it's largely going to be an informational transfer with the level of technological detail needed to then replicate that effect in some other setting. And then there's talks that are going to be a lot more motivational and inspirational. And in our field, at least, I think the sweet spot is being able to combine those two things together such that you're sharing information and people feel like, oh, I could now go do something like the speaker's telling me about, and I'm actually inspired and motivated to do that. So, like, do y'all know the quote where it's like talking about like a teacher or someone in your life where it's like, it's not the words they said, it's how they made you feel. That's actually pretty true, and it's even true in these settings, right? Like when we talk about the folks that we find to be good public speakers, it almost doesn't matter what the topic is. It's how we feel listening to them. And if we're motivated about our field in whatever way it is, whatever capacity, that's going to lead us to go out and feel energized and jazzed to do our jobs and to disseminate on our own and to do our own research and our clinical work. And the speaker may not have talked about that directly, but they've energized us and inspired us to do that. So that's the hallmark of a good speaker. If they can sprinkle in the information, then that's all the more exciting for us nerds.
I think that Friman should have ended it with that quote, right? Because most of his steps are about making the audience feel something towards you, right? Like,
well, it's usually I am excited to go out and practice ABA and tell everyone about ABA. I mean, like, that's like the most of the keynotes I've seen him do.
But and like when he is writing all of the steps, though, he's like, stand up and smile, like capture the audience, make eye contact with as many people as possible, right? Like he wants you to feel like you're just talking to you, like nobody else. And I think if he ended his article with how it made you feel, that would have been perfect.
Yeah, I mean, with Carbone, I'm going to drop his name like 4,000 times apparently today, but I always said it was like going to see like the Billy Graham of ABA speak. Like it was going to church. Like you were there for a revival. And I would go see his workshops over and over again over decades, right? Just because it really did make me excited again and again and again to hear him talk about the technology. And so I wanted to go out and try to replicate it. So yeah, Carbone's great that way. Tyra Sellers is an amazing public speaker. You always feel like she's talking straight from her heart. And even though it's about science, I love that. Greg Hanley is another fantastic person to listen to. And I saw him speak at the Profound Autism Conference in Boston a few months ago and saw him again recently. And what I love about Hanley is that not only does he start strong, but he gives you little Easter eggs within the talk, mostly in the form of F-bombs. Like he dropped the F-bomb at least 15 times during this speech. And it's sort of like your ears perk up all over again every time you hear it. I mean, he's making a fantastic point, but he's got a device to do it. So yeah, I think there's capturing attention and then there's also keeping attention. And I think those are hard things to do.
I know one section in the Heinicke kind of survey that I found sort of interesting, but also kind of I don't want to say like the least useful in terms of tips, but when it came to sort of the nonverbal components of public speaking, it did feel like every speaker had like 2 or 3 different ways they went about their speaking style. So, some liked to walk, but some wanted to stand at the podium. So I don't think unlike some of the other things, like PowerPoint presentation, less words, more pictures, don't describe, your jokes, right? Like those are pretty good. Like everyone should do that. Like it's death if you do the other, the opposite. But there's something about the kind of effective characteristics of a speaker, like how do you speak, that is always very unclear as to which ones of these are the ones you recommend to like the brand new speaker. Because like for me, I like to move around. I like to use my hands. Mm-hmm. But some speakers were very clear, like I'm fine to stand at the podium. I don't want to deal with like the technological problems of like, does the mic work or it starts making noises, right? I get too close to the amp and I get feedback. Everyone was pretty consistent with eye contact, like how you give eye contact, like you go around the room so everyone feels like you're paying attention to them. I mean, are there any sort of kind of the nonverbal characteristics or it could be vocal characteristics, so tone, Mandy, that you think of as these are key to me as a public speaker, even though I know they might not be for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not monotonous in my tone or how I talk about things. I generally don't say the same thing the same way twice. So even if you've heard one of my talks before, if you come again on a different day, it's probably going to be delivered slightly differently just because, again, improvisation. That's just sort of how I roll. Whereas, again, with Pat Friman, he's got a very particular pace, He's got a very particular timbre of his voice. Same thing with Dr. Nasia Ulezi. I can't think of her first.
Cirencioni.
Thank you. There. I couldn't come up with the tact, but she has an amazing cadence and timbre of her voice and the way that she pulls you in as she's giving this talk. Extremely engaging. And they're all different. So I think it's the idiosyncraticness of being authentic and being yourself that really is having your own voice that makes people curious to hear you in particular. It's like I've been playing around with ChatGPT a lot. And the fact that you can give it a prompt and say, okay, make a social media post about the new plant I just bought in the style of Anthony Bourdain. And it knows how to talk like Anthony Bourdain, right? Because that's how idiosyncratic his style is, right? And so I think figuring out who you are and what your particular voice is important. So again, you might start off copying other people, but the more you do that, the more I think you're able to sort of get into your own neural pathway about how this translates for you.
Mm-hmm. There is something, that is so true, Mandy, of that you can model whoever you want, but at the end of the day, to be an effective public speaker, you sort of have to be yourself in a way, and understanding what about the way you talk about the content and the way you bring your enjoyment has to be clear. Though I don't think there's anything wrong for folks who are still like, I'm nervous. I just want to copy. I'm going to do a Pat Friman impression. You know what? Fine. That'll probably be okay. At some point you'll be like, I don't think I sound the right. Like I try to sound very excited. I think there's some folks who sound, they have this kind of the timbre of their voice where they're like both excited, but it's also very kind of, there's like a stoicism to the excitement.
That's not you and I.
It's not, no, that's not how we talk at all.
That's not us.
I wish I could do it. I don't think I could though. And I feel like even if I could magically do it, I'd feel like, I don't really want to talk. That's not really how I talk. Like I love hearing it, but that's not how I'm going to present information. Like my tone of voice is always, isn't this the coolest thing you've ever, not because I'm giving the information necessarily. I mean, if people want to say that about my public speaking, that's fine. But I just think this content is so cool. I hope you think it's so cool too. It's like a new toy. Like, look at this cool thing I'm sharing with you. Isn't this cool? Don't you want one too? Like it feels very, pitch man sounds wrong. Like I'm selling snake oil, but
I'm totally a pitch man.
That excitement. There's an excitement.
That is what I'm good at.
Selling snake oil?
No, but
I've got a pyramid scheme for all of you listeners.
That's how my presentations are pitchy. They're pitchy, mm-hmm. And I think that's where I'm good at. Right? I once convinced like 30 people to buy Fitbits.
Wow.
Yeah. When Fitbit was the first.
How much money did you get from that?
I didn't get any.
Oh.
I was just like, look at my cool new Fitbit. I'm going to tell you all about it.
Yeah, I remember seeing Dr. Mary Serda. Is that correct pronunciation. Yeah. She was speaking at, I think, Baba, one of the first times I saw her speak. And I remember, again, her cadence is so smooth and her delivery is so focused and calm. And I think I was like standing in the back of the room with Tyra Sellers. And I said, man, I need to work on like delivering that way. And Tyra's like, no, don't. Like, you are you. Like, be you. And I was like, oh, okay. It's okay to be completely off the cuff the way that I speak, and people enjoy the different style. So it was great feedback. And also I love Mary. So, yeah.
So Mandy, as someone who's spoken to a variety of audiences for a variety of reasons for a long time, you've seen a lot of the speakers from the Heineke articles speak. You've copied things at some points in your career from like Vincent Carbone, but then you found your own style. Do you ever find as you go on, as you're speaking, like you ever hit a wall where you've just done it for so long that, or you've seen too many different speakers plus done it so long that you just suddenly feel like, what is it I'm doing? You start thinking about the craft too much and you get in your own head and you're like, I don't know how to do this anymore. Like, I couldn't give a talk to a first year graduate student about, the 7 principles at this point. Like, I'm done. I can't do it.
It doesn't happen to me very often. And like sometimes I'll get tripped up on my words. And I have a quick little device that I use often when I'm in front of an audience and that happens to me. I'll just say, is there a speech therapist in the house? And that usually like makes everybody laugh and sort of brings me back into myself. Like, don't take myself so seriously. Like, it's okay if I trip up.
That's clever.
I like that.
Thank you. You're welcome to use it anytime.
Don't you worry. I am going to.
Yeah. So yeah, I usually try to, knock myself out of that wall by making fun of myself a little bit. I think it's one of the most useful things that I've learned to tell myself before getting up on stage at any point is that I am not important, but my ideas are, right? So it's important for me to get up and do this job and to say these things because my ideas are important to get out into the world. So it's helpful to forget yourself.
Boom.
Yeah. Mandy, do you have any other kind of tips? Because on that sort of like getting out of your own head or like focusing on the message, because I know that, again, a lot of the expert speakers in the articles, that was something that came up of like, how do I get out of my own head or how do I focus? So, but you're always sort of doing both jobs of like, you have to get out of your own head, but you have to be attending to the audience. To like, you can't just get out of your own head and then just ignore what's going on around you completely. Or is that like something that you do? Like, you focus on the audience and it brings you back to the message of the idea. Like, how do you usually balance that?
Yeah, I like to use humor to sort of check in if people are actually paying attention. So if I come up with a one-liner in the middle of it and nobody laughs, then I know I'm in trouble. The other trick I'll tell you, this is the good news about getting older, is I wear glasses. I'm nearsighted, so I can't see people far away. So if I get too far in my head and I'm worried about people and how they're reacting, I just put my glasses on top of my head like this. And then I can't tell if they're scowling or smiling at me. And I just keep talking and just hope for the best.
Mm-hmm. So there are times that it's like, you know what? I got to just focus on the message. If the audience isn't having it, it's not what the speech needs right now, not what the talk needs right now.
That's right. It's not about me. I'm just going to keep going. So
I like that. I like that. That's a good way to balance sort of like where you are in the talk and how you can kind of try some tricks. Plus, I think because you just did it right now, our listeners aren't going to be able to see it, but you just did it right now. And I think it sends a very interesting message of like, pay attention to what I'm about to say, because it was important enough. I had to put my glasses up on top of my head. Like, I'm changing the tone.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it snaps people back too. That's kind of a dual
Yeah,
purpose.
I move all over the stage. I can't stand being behind a podium. That's how I sort of keep people tracking me. I know that they're actually watching where I'm moving. I'm very animated with my hands. I like to point at whatever I'm talking about. When I would do workshops, I could barely ever talk that I didn't have a dry erase board, right? Because I was constantly diagramming what I was talking about at the same time, right? So I'm both modes. I'm very, very verbal and also very visual at the same time. And again, I think that helps different styles of learners as the audience is.
So we talked a lot about kind of public speaking in general, like looking at some of the expert tips, looking at your tips, some of the things that we've learned over the years. But I think one of the big changes of the past 10 years of how many outlets there are for public speaking that there were not, probably for most of the speakers that are on this list, I've mostly been, I go to conferences. The audiences might change, behavior analysts, non-behavior analysts, but it's a lot of, I go to conferences, or maybe I've started to, done some webinars that are pretty much just like going to conferences, just you're in your basement or wherever you're recording. But we have so many different outlets for sharing information. Like this podcast, for example, is one that we didn't really have a lot of these until, it's the mid 2010s. Mm-hmm. And now there are a whole bunch of them. Mm-hmm. When we think about public speaking skills, is it a different repertoire when you're speaking into your mic to your podcast audience, or if you're doing a stream on YouTube, for example, that you might say this is a different beast, therefore the same skills are not going to apply the same way? Like, what are your thoughts there, especially knowing that you're looking into technology and looking into some of these kind of different avenues of sharing information?
Well, podcasts can be forgiving in one way, in that you can say, can we edit that out, right? Whereas in a live venue, you don't have that luxury. Like, whatever comes out of your mouth is going to land on the audience one way or the other. And so neither is better or worse. There's got to be some forgiveness on both styles. And this is where sort of our cultural humility and our practice sort of comes in, is that I say this all the time in my It's Not Binary talk, like, whatever you're doing today as a behavior analyst, whatever you're using in your practice, is not going to be appropriate or relevant or ethical in probably 5 more years, right? And same thing goes with public speaking, right? Whatever information I'm disseminating today is based on everything that's brought me to this point today. There's going to be new information, new data that comes to light, maybe tomorrow, maybe 2 years from now, that's going to make part of what I say no longer appropriate, relevant, possibly ethical, right? And so you have to know that whether you're speaking to a live audience, that you've got this sort of ethereal nature of the message you're sending right now, or if you have a podcast or a video or YouTube or even a TikTok that is going to be a time capsule and forever be somewhere on the internet for people to go back and scrutinize, that you're going to have to give yourself and everybody else some grace that that's what you said in the moment, right? So yeah, it's whatever you're comfortable with, but just know that there's pluses and minuses to both.
One thing I appreciate about that too is hopefully the things that we're talking about now will be resolved because of our great presentation style. And in 5 years, we should be talking about something better and bigger because of the dissemination that we're doing today, potentially.
Well, I mean, in 5 years, you're going to have enough footage of me running my mouth that we'll be able to tell the AI to come up with a presentation in my style.
I'm going to try that.
What? Good AI?
I'm going to be like, AI, ChatGPT, write this in terms of Jackie McDonald style. And they'll be like, the Australian accent or you?
Hilarious.
I guess that's a good defense in the future. We'll have to see who's first, which is like, I didn't say those things. That was an AI generated thing. You prove it. They put it in a learning algorithm and they got my style down and they put a bunch of terrible things in my mouth. I never said that, right?
That's right. And they got the deep fake. Yeah.
Oh, so basically, if you're scared of public speaking and you're like, well, I'll do a stream or a podcast because then I don't have to look at the scary audience. The fear there should be, well, yeah, but the nice thing about speaking at a conference is the people who are there will remember what you say, but not everyone in the world will be there. And 10 years from now, it's their memory of what you said, no matter. But if you have they're going to go look at the file. So yeah, it's less scary in the moment, but there's a longer tail on the anxiety of what is your audience going to take from this?
Oh yeah. And and since the internet and social media, again, I talk about this ad nauseum with my It's Not Binary talk, like the binary thinking around everything either good or bad, right? And people piling on to issues that they don't understand the context of, and just absolutely destroying people online. It's got to stop, right? So yeah, again, have grace for yourself and for other people out here doing this talking, because it's ethereal. It's a moment in time. It doesn't mean that it's going to be correct for perpetuity, right?
That's why there's multiple editions of books.
Amen. Right?
I put in like a really crazy rant in page 37 in first edition. I don't want that in the second edition. Let's cut that one out. I don't know what I just kept typing in. And it just went way off.
I hear that. Right. No.
Well, Mandy, that actually, your point brings a good segue to some of our last points. Therefore, I think we need to move into the dissemination station. Here we are. We
The
made
sweet
it.
sounds of the train station.
So, talking about grace and sharing online, and things aren't neither good nor bad when it comes to a lot of these situations. One of the articles we haven't really touched as much on is Becerevic's kind of survey on should behavior analysts sort of defend behavior analysis. And so when we're talking about effective dissemination, I do find that article to have kind of a very, I don't think it means to, but almost an antagonistic point of view of graduate students. You've got to always be ready to defend behavior analysis to the general public, which means you need to be able to do public speaking at the drop of a hat to let everyone know, actually, this is what behavior analysis is. And while I agree in some respect, I don't know if I fully agree on the idea that everyone who has taken a graduate level class in behavior analysis needs to be ready to do a public speech on the importance of behavior analysis to everybody. I mean, what are your thoughts there? As much as I would love it to be binary of like, that is a good idea for an article, that is a bad idea, I know it is not. So kind of, what are your thoughts on when do we public speak about behavior analysis? When do we disseminate and when do we just kind of keep our mouths shut?
Yeah, I mean, the whole notion of starting off a retort to somebody's ill-advised opinion about ABA with, well, actually, is just terrible in the first place. Like, nobody wants to start there, and nobody wants to listen to, well, actually.
That's like middle school, right? That's like middle school start. Well, actually.
Yeah, I mean, ask any number of women if they want to hear, well, actually, and you'll get a very decent data set there. Secondly, I think it's some of the most powerful words in the world is to be able to say, I don't know, right? So, again, there's 1,000 wrong answers. I don't know isn't one of them. And so if somebody comes at you and has an opinion about something and you don't want to launch into a dissertation about why they're incorrect potentially, I think you can say that's interesting. I'd be curious to think about that more. I'm curious where you got that data. Who's in that data, right? Just be curious about it. You don't have to immediately have an antagonistic approach to let me smack down all of your ill-advised assumptions about ABA, right? They've got a context of their own, so be curious about that.
So just because you can public speak on ABA does not mean you need to find every opportunity possible to do so.
Absolutely not.
It's the time to private speak. Keep it
Inside voice, yes. On the inside.
All right. So for folks who are kind of nervous or getting new to public speaking, don't make every opportunity about practicing your craft. But for folks who are a little nervous, I mean, I think Pat Friman's advice is great of the idea of public speaking and your fear of public speaking. Like you mentioned, Mandy, it's kind of the number one fear in a lot of lists. It's not about how do I get rid of the fear of public speaking? It's about I need to do public speaking whilst being slightly afraid. So beyond kind of having that as the mindset, what have you found, maybe in supervision or maybe in sort of working with folks who are new to the field is a good kind of tip to get folks started on their own effective dissemination and public speaking journey?
Can you start the first part of that again?
No problem.
I lost myself too. I
know.
Was like, did I stop listening? I don't think so.
I'm gonna peel back the curtain. Speaking of we had a question earlier on is there a point that you're sort of like too into the craft? I feel like there was a period where I've asked so many questions at this point. I've forgotten, how did I used to do this? How did I used to just ask simple questions? And I've gotten very in my own head about why can't I just ask questions anymore?
Okay.
So I appreciate the feedback. I'll go back and do it. I'm just going to read what's on there. What is the tip that you would give to someone who is interested in being a better public speaker and disseminator?
I'm there now. I couldn't follow even where you
But I've got an anecdote before you go in. Wait a minute. No, I'm going to stop.
What's a tip for somebody to get into public speaking, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think start small. Maybe have a co-presenter. Maybe you say, hey, I want to be on a panel first and get used to that format. And that way you're not completely carrying the whole presentation yourself. I think that's a good way to start. God bless this generation of TikTokers. Maybe you make a TikTok, right? people have the attention span of a common housefly. And therefore, if you just want to make a quick 60-second video and disseminate a little bit of information and get some feedback on that, again, you'll find out whether people like your messaging and your style just based off of a quick video. I think that's an easy way to put your toe in the water.
I like that one because that's not one I would have thought of. Not really using the platform too. It's cool. It's cool how folks can edit, and I think there's something for those like the hyper cuts that I think are really awesome. It's just not.
Yeah,
it hasn't really been like how I want to get content most of the time. But you know what? It's new folks want to learn that way. All right. But what about those like me who've been doing this for a long time and think they're pretty good at it, yet still find moments where they say, crap, I don't remember how to do this thing anymore. Like what's the tip you'd give to keep folks sharp at their public speaking abilities?
Sharp. I think you've got to continually try some new things. I mean, you got to infuse some creativity into it, whether that's you wear something different on your occasion, whether you say, all right, I'm going to add some music to this somewhere in there, just do something silly and offbeat to keep yourself sharp. I mean, the thing that just came to mind for me is like, what if I brought like a little quartet up on stage and had them play the Pink Panther theme while I was singing, presenting in the background? That would be fun, right? So
that would be fun.
That would be super fun. It's the best use of a triangle ever in a song.
Or like those bands that like have someone painting.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Just anything that's going to like shift it up for you a little bit. Yeah.
So change things up. So you
got to keep it interesting to yourself.
It's okay to change it up. Yeah, make it interesting to yourself too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mandy Ralston, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was really great hearing kind of your reflection on the topics, on the research topic, and then your own personal kind of practice as well. It was really great to get that into the conversation. So we really thank you for that. If folks would like to reach out or check out what you're doing right now, do you have I know you have a great web presence. I do have to say, I'm not sure if it's your most recent website, but you had one with awesome pictures. And if there were more research on how do you take good pictures that people say, I'm going to take this person seriously, we would do that topic because, man, I don't know how to, I don't think I ever look like anything other than like, I just woke up and I'm here to talk about ABA.
There's like the sparkly ones that I love.
I
was like, I am into this. How can I get sparkly professional photos?
Really good. It's like, I'm going to take this person seriously. I don't know what they're going to talk about yet but man, I'm ready to listen.
Thank you. I think it helps that I have a photography background myself. I grew up with a dark room in my basement with my dad. And so I understand a little bit about being in front of and behind a camera. Shout out to my photographer, Chet White. He is the director of photography for the University of Kentucky Athletic Department. So he and I get together about once a quarter and do a different shoot. And that keeps me full of media so that the internet will eventually get sick of my face. But yeah, if people want to reach out, they can go to amandaralston.com. That's my personal website. They can go to nonbinarysolutions.com. That's the company website. They can go to noetic.ai. That's the software. So Noetic is spelled KNOWETIC.ai. That is our clinical decision support software that is helping guide clinician through treatment pathways. Super exciting stuff there. And then if you want to find me on social media, I like to say that I am vaguely professional on LinkedIn. I am mostly authentic on Instagram, and I am completely unhinged on Facebook. So depending on your flavor, you can find me in all those places.
I think that's the audience for Facebook, is completely unhinged.
True. Know your audience, right?
Once again, big thanks to Mandy Ralston for being on the show. Again, the places you can find her online, and we'll have links in the show notes, were noetic.ai, which sounds pretty cool, and then mandyralston.com and nonbinarysolutions.com. So you can check that out to see even more of Mandy online. We are really excited that you listened to this episode. We hope you enjoyed listening and are subscribing, leaving reviews. If you want even more ABA Inside Track content, you can even check us out on patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where you can subscribe at whatever level. But at the $5 and $10 levels, you gain access to our listener choice and book club episodes. We're getting to the tail end of our summer of book club, meaning we've done book clubs from pretty much May up to, we're going to be doing them into September as well. So if you're not subscribed at the $10 level, you are missing out on a few of those, as well as some free CEs you get from subscribing, as well as getting episodes a week ahead of time. So again, that's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. You can also email us at any time at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. And since Diana is still stuck in a ball field somewhere recording remotely, Jackie is here to help me do the last section of the show, pairings.
Yes, I'm so excited that I get to do it.
Do you want to do all the pairings, Jackie, or just the food ones?
I want to do all the pairings.
Do all the pairings. Go for it.
Yeah.
Jackie, take it away.
Woo! It's because I couldn't be here in the very, very beginning because I was driving here.
Yeah, so now you owe me extra podcast minutes. That's how it works.
That's where it's working. Okay, so what we decided today to do for pairings was to pair up the authors or the public speakers that were in the survey of the expert public speakers so that you could hear them public speak. So we had quite a few of them, not all of them, but we had quite a few of them that have been on the show. And I will tell you what they are, not in any order, right? Not from favorite to least favorite.
The order we found them.
But the order we found them in. So the first episode is episode 187, and that's Memory with Dave Palmer, although that one is one of my favorites and so eye-opening. We also had on Jim Carr, and that was episode 121, Child Welfare. We had recently Dr. Linda LeBlanc on episode 278. We had Matthew Normand on episode 211 when he spoke about variety in ABA. We ourselves talked about public speaking way, 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 way back in episode 77. And then we also have a grab bag, a research and grab bag, episode 12, one of our first grab bag, where I think Rob talks about pauses in public speaking as one of the articles.
Yeah, because a lot of articles, we didn't talk about it in the episode, but a lot of public speaking articles are really about pretty much, I sound dumb. How do I sound less dumb?
Right.
So there's a lot of like, what do I do when I'm pausing or saying those kind of filled pauses in public speaking, which that can be useful as well. However, that is like one of the skills that you need. Like if all you do is I can get up and not say or leave long, confusing, embarrassing pauses, that's great. That doesn't mean you're a good public speaker.
Right.
So.
And then also we had a bonus episode 19, where we were celebrating the 40th birthday of the Berkshire Behavior Analysis and Therapy Conference. So during that Babbitt extravaganza, we interviewed many of our speakers.
It was so many people. So if you want to hear other folks that were not on some of the people on the expert list were there as well. But if you just want to hear lots of people who do lots of public speaking, we got tons and tons and tons of them in that chunk. Yeah. So bonus 19.
And then for food, I know Diana usually does this, but I decided to choose the food today because she wasn't here. So
that's what you get. If you don't show up to the podcast recording, you don't get to do pairings.
So my pairings would be popcorn, because like when people are public speaking and you want to wait for the drama to unfold, you're like eating the popcorn. That's all the memes. No? I don't know.
At first I thought you were like, one of the snacks I love to bring to a conference is a bag of popcorn.
That's also true. Yes, because you can eat it wherever. And also slushies, only because I love slushies so much. And I think it would be hilarious to have someone drinking a slushie in the back of the room while you were public speaking because of that.
Make the slurp sound.
Yeah.
And then the sound when you're like, I got to break up the ice when you get to the end.
By the end, it's like
making that kind of weird sound.
Yeah. So those are the food pairings for today. Popcorn and slushies. Obviously, Diana is better at this than I am. But
well, I don't know if she's going to let you do another pairing. So you got to swing for the fences when you get the chance. All right. And you're a great public speaker when someone can be eating crunchy popcorn and making those terrible slushy sounds. And you just keep going with your awesome talk. Here's that last code word, transgender, TRANSGENDER, transgender. It's when someone's gender identity differs from that which they associate with the sex assigned at birth. Again, something that our field is hopefully going to continue doing a better job at supporting the needs of the transgender community. Transgender. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. Some final big thanks. Again, big thanks to Mandy Ralston. Big thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro, outro music. Kyle Sturry for interstitial music. And Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.